A ver, hacemos un minuto más.
Bien.
Carlos, me piden que te alejes un poco de la cámara porque en el live streaming se ve tu cara cortada.
Yo creo que empezamos ya.
Ujú.
Bueno, buenos días a todos. Les doy la bienvenida a esta preconferencia preparatoria de la tercera
Good
conferencia.
morning. I'd like to welcome you to this third meeting of the Conference of the Parties of the Escazú Agreement. I would like to especially greet the chair of Uruguay, Marcelo Causillas, and the representative of the public, Irene Murillo, who are with us today and will be offering some welcome remarks, and especially all of the states, member states, and observers joining us today, and of course, to all attendees that are part of the Escazú Agreement that have joined us today. Before I offer the floor to the chair, who will be moderating this session, I'd like to mention that we have interpreting English and Spanish. At the bottom of the screen, you will see a globe where you can click and choose the language of your choice. Without further ado, I'd like to offer the floor to Marcelo Causillas, Director of the Legal Department of the Ministry of the Environment of Uruguay, who is chairing the Escazú Agreement Steering Committee and is the chair of the COP. Marcelo, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Carlos, and thank you. As chair of the presiding officers, I'd like to thank you for joining us today for this virtual preparatory meeting of the pre-COP for the third meeting of the Conference of the Parties of the Escazú Agreement that will be held in ECLAC, Santiago, Chile, from April 22nd to 24th. I would like to begin by congratulating all of you, because today marks 6 years since the adoption of the Escazú Agreement, and this is a day that many of you will remember offered us the possibility to be present, and it was beginning for all these negotiations and has allowed us to be here today. We are very proud, and of course it is a reason for celebrating for the entire region. As you know, the purpose of today's meeting is to advance the discussions that we will be holding at the COP3. Their main objective will be the consideration and approval of the action plan on human rights defenders in environmental matters, prepared by the coordinators of the ad hoc working group. This is Chile, Ecuador, and St. Kitts and Nevis. At the COP3, we will also be presenting reports by the implementation pathways developed by the state parties and other matters. We will be hearing from other matters that the state parties may decide. As you will see in today's program, After the opening, the agenda and organization of work will be presented. Then the draft decisions to be considered at COP3 will be introduced. And we will also hear a brief intervention from the Implementation Support and Compliance Committee and leave some space for other business. I would now like to invite you to the elected representative of the public, but we will be analyzing the different matters and topics. We need to understand how it will operate and what other topics will be discussed and resolved. I would now like to invite the elected representative of the public to offer her welcoming remarks. It is Irene. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for joining this meeting. On behalf of the representation of the public, we would like to offer a few words of welcome to this meeting and, of course, to wish you all very successful work. The first conference of the parties of the Escazú Agreement had the vision of prioritizing the rights of the human rights defenders of environmental matters. And this takes us to one of the main objectives of the next COP, which will be celebrated in Santiago. This is the analysis and approval of the action plan. From the moment that the Conference of the Parties made this decision, it has been very intense work by all. And this special group led by St. Kitts and Nevis and by the public. Excuse me, Chile, Ecuador, and St. Kitts and Nevis. And it has been significant work with all the testimonies, hearing all of the different stakeholders on the matter of human rights defenders of environmental matters in the region. And in this sense, we would like to express our thanks to all of the people and organizations that have made contributions during the consultation process, which was very extensive, in order to have a robust action plan and so that it can serve as support for implementation in our countries. I believe that the message now is simply of thanks to all of you for the process and with hopes that a positive plan can be approved in the next COP. That is what we would like to say on behalf of the representatives of the public. Thank you. Thank you, Irene. Thank you to the representatives of the public. And of course, we share in the wishes expressed. I'd like to offer the floor now to the Secretary of the Escazú Agreement. Carlos, you have the floor. Thank you, Marcelo. In the first place, on behalf of ECLAC, I would like to join in the congratulations for the anniversary of the beginning of the Escazú Agreement. These have all been very intense years for the Conference of the Parties, and I'd like to say that in this sixth anniversary, we've had 15 parties of the Escazú Agreement. We still have many other parties to ratify or sign the agreement. And one of the priorities is to move forward with the ratification processes. I would like to invite you. Irene has mentioned the intense participation process that there's been for this plan. I believe participation is of the utmost importance at a national level in all of the regions, countries, those that are parties to move forward with the implementation of the agreement. The objective of the agreement is to advance in the effective implementation of access rights, and this needs to be done from the territory at a national level in the member states. And for those that are not party, we must continue to persuade the players or the stakeholders so that they will understand that Escazú is a better way to do things in order to achieve sustainable development in the region. I'd like to invite all those of you who are with us today so that we make a significant effort for more countries to join this agreement. Another priority topic for the Secretariat is to advance in the implementation of the agreement, not only because it is the objective, but because it is our conviction that this will serve insofar as all our countries are able to effectively implement the agreement. The agreement arose from a process of dialogue where the strengthening of capacities and cooperation between the parties, but especially between all players, is the way to move forward. We know the reality in the region, both from the perspective of the economic situation, but the tragedy of the environmental defenders and the environmental pressures. So it is extremely important for us to improve the procedures and make them a reality. Another priority for us is to assist the Conference of the Parties. We will have the third Conference of the Parties. It is, again, a conference of the parties. We must assist the parties to make these decisions that we need to make. One of them is to approve the action plan on human rights defenders of environmental matters in the region. But there are other priorities as well. The committee that supports compliance will be a reality in this Conference of the Parties because its operations will begin soon. We will be hearing from the chair. It will be a very important tool to support the parties and the public in the implementation, and of course, to continue to strengthen the observatory, that is Principle 10, and where we have many advances, both in terms of legislation, jurisprudence, so that the parties may use those tools. It is also important for ECLAC to join other or to involve other players from the public to the development banks and other regions in the planet that are looking at towards Latin America with interest.
We all need to learn from the regional process, but also from international experience. I would like to close my words by saying that this year, the political forum will cover two SDGs very close to Escazú, number 13, with implications it has with the loss of biodiversity, and of course, economic transformations which are required to face this problem. And so the procedural rights are going to be essential for having the participatory and transparent processes, but also SDG 16, which tells us about transparent, strong institution, the peaceful society, and a state of rights. So I invite you all to participate at ECLAC in the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, which is organized from April 16 and 18, just before the Conference of the Parties, because we are going to be discussing the sustainable development of Latin America. And I would like to close by thanking Marcelo, Irene, and all the ones who have participated, not just in the process to build the action plan, but also in the national processes where has been a roadmap has been developed, and the countries which are participating in the dissemination processes. There are many ways to participate in Escazú agreement, and I thank you very much for the support that you have provided from the public, from the parties, and from the countries which are making headways in this process of the ratification of the agreement. Thank you so much, Marcelo. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you to the Secretariat. In this way, we can conclude the opening session of this meeting of this pre-COP, and now we can continue with the points of the agenda. Before that, I would like to ask you, the ones who are connected, please check the way you have been named on the screen, and please rename you in case if this is necessary. So the delegations of the countries, we can have your name and then the country you are representing. In the case of the public, the institution name of the representation of the public itself. So before knowing the name of the individual, we can identify what are you representing to. This is very simple to do it. On the Zoom, you can find the rename command where you have the three dots at the right, upper right. Now, the organizations of the work of the conference of the parties number 3. In this meeting, we are going to analyze and understand the topics and how the work is going to be organized for that conference. Now I'm going to give the floor to the Secretariat so the chair can provide this information about this aspect. Thank you so much, Marcelo. I would like to remind you that, as established in the rules of procedures of the Conference of the Parties,
que lleva el liderazgo organizativo
and in consultation with the presiding officers, now the Secretariat has to prepare a document about the meeting of the conferences of the parties, including all the documents and the provisional agenda. The rules state that the provisional agenda with the objectives and the topics to be discussed should be distributed at least 8 weeks before the meeting. And so we can foster and continue fostering the decisions that need to be made in the conference of the parties to have a very executive conference. So we have published, and even before that, of the prior to these 8 weeks, we have published the agenda of the conference, and in that date, the invitation letters were sent to all the delegations of the state parties, and this agenda is available on the website of the conference and this following address. So what do we have here? This will guide all the works throughout this conference of the parties. The agenda is made up of 7 points, and I'm going to, you can read them on the screen. And I'm going to allow you to read them in English there, but I'm going to mention all these points in Spanish. We are going to have the aspect organizational matters. This is point number 1. Then we have the adoption of the agenda, the credentials of the states parties, And then I would like to emphasize the importance that the delegations send the credentials duly in advance. And then we have the election or re-election of the presiding officers. As you know, presiding officers of the Conference of the Parties, they have a mandate and will be finishing in this opportunity, but they can be re-elected for one additional period only. Then, point number 2, we have the reports provided by the presiding officers and the secretariat and the public, and we are going to provide a report of the support committee for compliance and implementation. Point number 3 has to do with the consideration. Point number 4 has to do consideration and adoption of the action plan on human rights defenders in environmental matters. This is one of the essential point of the conference of the parties stemming from the first conference. Then we're going to have one session on the national implementation of Escazú agreement. And then we have other matters which are related to other matters that the parties would like to discuss. And then finally, we are going to have agreed decisions. It's important to highlight the points of this agenda which are not necessarily considered in this order, and some of the points can be discuss in non-successive sessions, so we can discuss some of the points of the agenda to go to other points in special sessions and additional aspects of interest in such a way that we can have deliberations and we can then um, uh, go be back to the session again. So these 7 points are not going to be discussed consecutively. Now, I would like to mention the organization of this agenda day after day and hour after hour. The Conference of the Parties will be developed during 3 days, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of April, but there are other activities which extend up to 25th and 26th. On the 22nd of April, this is a very important day for ICLAC and the Secretariat because we're going to have the inauguration of the conference in the afternoon. That's going to be 14:30 hours. And this is very important, not only for registration of the participants, but also we are going to have the opportunity to have a brief session of the support committee for implementation and compliance, a meeting of the presiding officer, meeting of the public representatives, other delegations, and of course, the meeting of the presiding officers with the elected representatives. So we are going to learn from all individuals. We are going to be participating and the people we will join to the conference of the party to know different aspects of this procedure and to know also the topics which are going to be covered and progress as they are taking place in the afternoon. We're going to have inauguration and then we're going to have a session then in relation to the 22nd day, Escazú agreement came into force on the day of the Mother Earth, and then with that consideration, this day has been elected as the day of importance on 23rd and 24th. So we're going to be working continuously to reach a conclusion and having covered the 7 points of the agenda. So after the organization matters, adoption of the agenda, we will be working at the different decisions. And at the Secretariat, we have prepared some special side events to make progress and know the progress made in site-specific topics related to all the aspects of Escazú Agreement. Escazú Agreement is focused on defenders of human rights and environmental matters, but it's important to make progress in Article 9, or provided that we make progress in Articles 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the agreement. So there are some topics that should be highlighted in the parties can work in the implementation of the same. Well, all these points will be subject to the progress made in each point and the adoption of decisions of by the Conference of the Parties, which is the essential aspect of this. And the last day, we hope that we have the agreed decisions, and I would like to mention as well that on the 25th, we're going to have the fourth in-person meeting of implementation and the compliance committee, and you're all invited to participate, and there will be some special sessions about other topics which are open sessions, such as participation in environmental impact assessment systems and others, and we're going to notify other aspects which go beyond the Conference of the Parties. Well, this is the general outlooks of the Conference of the Parties. And Marcelo, I give you back the floor back. Thank you. Thank you. I think that you have been very clear and very useful presentation provided by Carlos, and we can open this for any comments or questions about this agenda or the way this will be developed in terms of works. And there is a question of Angelica Barreira. She's asking about the activities considerable April 26th. Probably, Carlos, you can answer that question. Thank you. On the 26th of April, there are no specific activities for the public, but that day, the Committee to Support Implementation and Compliance will be working, not only supporting the Conference of the Parties, but they are going to have an open session on the 25th, and the 26th, they are going to continue with their work. Thank you so much. There is another question here. The presiding officers meeting, it has been was the day that this has been scheduled after this has been elected. Well, the presiding officers is meeting continuously, and so the presiding officers can also meet on the 25th in the morning. But as I told you before, the presiding officer, with support of the secretariat, normally sessions on continuous basis, what is something very important to finally succeed this endeavor. Thank you so much. I have some requests here from Bolivia. Patricia Guzman.
Patricia, ¿puedes escucharnos?
Patricia, can you hear us?
Marcelo, una precisión.
Marcelo, just to specify here, those who attend this preparatory meeting, can they write questions in the chat? Oh, only the panelists can speak in this meeting, and the other attendees can write any questions or comments in the chat. Thank you, Francisca. Could we modify the situation of Patricia Guzman so that Bolivia can take the floor?
Sí, te estamos escuchando.
Ahora
Adelante.
sí.
Yes, we can hear you.
Adelante, Patricia. Sí, por favor.
You have the floor, Patricia.
Ahora estás muteada nuevamente.
You're muted again.
Ahora sí, perdón, le voy a dar la palabra.
Okay, I'm going to offer the floor.
Creo que perdimos a...
I believe we have lost Patricia.
Perdón, Bolivia. Se interrumpió la
Bolivia, the communications were interrupted when Patricia was saying that she was going to offer the floor to someone else. Perhaps you can reintroduce yourselves. Thank you very much from Bolivia. Diego Fertico would like to greet the Secretariat, the Chair, and all members of the public. Our request is as follows specifically. In the first COP of the Escazú Agreement, Bolivia presented a proposal to enrich the rules in support of the region, and the decision was made 1/3 request the Secretariat to circulate the proposal of Bolivia during the conference of the parties in order to improve the rules and composition and operation of the support committee. Now, understanding that we're going to the third COP, we expressly request that the Secretariat submit a report of how the circulation of this proposal made by Bolivia has been circulated in point 2 of the COP when the Secretariat presents the reports. It seems important insofar as the circulation of this proposal is substantive to the presentation of the Escazú Agreement. And we request, therefore, in point 6, other topics, that a proposal be considered that is being sent by Bolivia today regarding measures to strengthen forms of support to the application and compliance of decision 1/3 to improve the composition of the committee. So we're going to send this as well in order for it to be considered in the discussions that we're going to hold at the third COP. That's all for us for now. The interpreters apologize for any inconvenience. The sound was wanting on Bolivia's side. Thank you, Bolivia. I believe that both points that you mentioned, in fact, yes, there are certain items that will be mentioned at the Conference of the Parties. I don't think there will be any problem including this in the report that you made reference to. And regarding point 2 and the possibility of making proposals for item 6 of the Conference of the Parties, I will offer the floor to Secretariat so that they can offer us the deadlines and formalities in this regard. Carlos. Yes, good morning, Diego. In fact, as the chair said, in the report, and as you anticipate in the report, all chairs and secretariats have included all of the reports regarding all the decisions. As you will recall, regarding the second point, the procedure has been established and the rules of procedure of the Conference of the Parties, and therefore parties may propose discussions at the conference, and we would then it would then be mentioned at the conference itself or give way to future conferences. All proposals need to be part of a point of the agenda. So we would ask that Calivia send that proposal so that it can be reviewed by the presiding officers, but it can also be included in other matters so that we can learn of these proposals being made by Bolivia. Thank you, Chair or Secretary. Thank you. And we are looking to see how we can assist how we can attend the meetings in the morning of April 22nd. Where will these take place? Well, following, Alonso Rivera is asking, when would the waiting list be ready for the public to attend the third COP in Santiago? Perhaps the Secretariat could answer each of these questions. Yes, thank you, Chair. These questions will be touched upon in the last point today, other matters. So, because we will be explaining all the procedures associated with the conference of the parties. So, I'd like to mention that all meetings, all COPs, the committee, and on the 25th is open. Therefore, everyone can participate, and the meetings of the public with representatives of the public and all those meetings that will take place the previous day. The registration of the conference of the parties allows for participation in any of those meetings of the public with their representatives in the preparatory meetings, as well as meetings that will be taking place at ECLAC on the 25th. So people that have registered will be participating all week if they choose to do so. And I will answer the other question on registration in other matters. The next point. St. Lucia requests to be assigned as panelist. I assume to make an intervention. In this case, I would like to ask St. Lucia whether you would like to take the floor now. Kate Wilson, you have the floor.
Good morning, Kate. Can you hear me? Mientras aguardamos la conexión de Santa Lucía, hay una
So
consulta.
while we wait for St. Lucia to connect, there's a question from Nicole that asks whether we can provide a schematic for the meetings to be held all week, including the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, saying whether these would be open or closed to the public's participation. Perhaps, well, I would like the Secretariat to reply on this. Well, while we wait for St. Lucia to take the floor, we can do that. As you know, all the information of the COP of the Secretariat that is available, when it is made available, it is uploaded to the website of the COP. That is done every hour, as well as the rooms and where these activities will take place. In principle, everything except specific work meetings, for example, Friday with the compliance committee, or any internal work by the secretariat, and both on the side of the public or the presiding officers, they're all open meetings. And all this information will be on the website of the Conference of the Parties. And you have access to this from the website of the Escazú Agreement site. And there's also ECLAC's website and that of the Division of Sustainable Development. Thank you, Secretary. I would like to thank Juanita Risa for the communications on the Commission on Water and Biodiversity of the Senate of the Republic of Colombia. Thank you very much. And Irene Murillo is including a message where she expands on the opportunity in the third Conference of the Parties. There will be elected representatives represented and they will be presenting a report. Yes. So if there is no connection with St. Lucia at this point, well, I'd like to ask if they would like to make use of the floor at this point. I believe we don't have an answer. Perhaps Francisca has some other communication with St. Lucia. Thank you, Marcelo. St. Lucia, for now, St. Lucia is offline, but we are communicating with them internally. Thank you. In this case, we are concluding the point on the different topics of the COP, and we will continue with the next point, which is on the agenda of today's meeting, which is projects for decision making, and this is something that we need to get to know, the projects that are going to be put to consideration at the COP. So during this pre-COP, we will be briefly introducing these projects that were published 8 weeks before the Conference of the Party. If you had the opportunity to analyze these projects, they are 6 projects put forth by the presiding officers that is a list without any order of importance. In the first place, the project on the draft decision on the plan of action on human rights defenders on environmental issues in Latin America and the Caribbean. This will probably be focused, or the focus of our meeting in April.
The decision project on national focal points of the parties. Then we have decision project on mainstreaming of gender. Then we have decision project on election of the presiding officer. And the last project is decision project on next meeting of the Conference of the Parties. I would like to make reference to each of these projects because without reading them in this moment, because you have them online version. But first, decision project action plans approval on defenders of human rights and environmental matters, the main objective is to approve the text that has been proposed by the working group, and this is also available at the website of the agreement. Second, the decision project is aiming at to a resolution about the working group activities, ad hoc working group activities, which has been in charge now to develop a plan that we're going to put it for consideration. But the resolution is that they can continue working, following up and proposing adjustment to the plan in the future, together with the Secretariat and in contact with the Conference of the Parties. Third, I think that this is very important to be highlighted, is that the project that we are proposing decides to continue with regional fora on the defenders on human rights and environmental matters, and something that has been revealed as a great opportunity to have. So we think that this fourth pillar of the agreement can continue, and these decisions always depend on budget aspects. But this is a very important issue. So here, I think that this is a proposal we should keep. And with this, we're going to thank the states, parties, and peoples, and individuals, and institutions who have contributed to this, and the parties are invited to implement this in their respective environments. And given the importance of this decision, because the ownership of the plan would be put to the Conference of the Parties. So the coordinators of the working group will have the opportunity to present the aspects on environmental matters, to make a report on the content of the plan. So this decision can be part of as an annex to the plan. I understand that the coordinators are connected, and then the representation of Chile will take the floor first. If this is correct, I will give the floor to Chile. Thank you. Good morning. I also endorse this celebration of the March the 4th, Escazú, and we had been working together with St. Kitts and Nevis, the responsibility to propose this process that has been open, inclusive, and I would like to highlight the representative of the public, which has have a great participation, not only on the virtual platform, but also in this fora, which has been highly relevant and in this proposal. And you have seen this proposal as of February 28th. And as this process is so important, I would like to give the floor first to my colleague from Ecuador to show how has been the participation to build up this plan proposal for the defenders of the environmental matters. So I would like to give the floor to my colleague from Ecuador. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. And I would like first to thank you all for this opportunity to present what the process has been in terms of development of action plan of defenders of human rights, environmental matters of Latin America and the Caribbean. This presentation will be followed by the presentation from my colleague of Chile, who will explain about the content of this document, which already published for the consideration of the states parties. Then, well, we have a previous meeting. The ones who participated in the previous meeting has had the opportunity to see this slide already, but provide you with a brief context. The juridical framework, this Article 9 of the Escazú Agreement establishes that each party will guarantee a safe, suitable environment for the human rights defenders, so to act without threat, restriction, and insecurity, and to take the proper measure to recognize, protect, promote their rights, as well as to prevent, investigate, and sanction any threatened or intimidation. This is very important because it regulates the action plan and the different accesses being built in accordance to this juridical framework. In terms of the origin, the COP1 took place in Santiago in April at the year 2022. The decision went 6. There was agreement in establishing an ad hoc working group, the open composition on defenders of human rights, of environmental matters. And this group has been coordinated by Chile, Ecuador, and St. and navies. And so this has been essential to be presented in COP3 with the approval of April 22nd. And so the process, as you can see here, was being very intense. It was taken place in different stages. The meeting was then April 22, then the defenders on environmental matters in Quito, Ecuador. The first inputs were gathered here, inputs from the working table sessions, and the working group presented this proposal for the extraordinary COP in Buenos Aires, Argentina, April 2023, and then there was a public consultation on this annotated index proposal. Also, there was a working group meeting in August 2023, and finally, there was the second forum of human rights defenders on environmental matters, which was presented after this annotated index and the first draft of the action plan. And then the working group has gathered in different opportunities and have developed a public participation strategies so they can provide their inputs to the action plan draft. And that was done as part of the second forum, where the different inputs were received for this draft, and also through a virtual consultation in coordination with key stakeholders. And after that, we have had 2 meetings of the working group coordinators to systematize the results of the consultation, the virtual consultation, and we have had meetings with the presiding officers, informal and open meetings, and we have prepared the draft of the revised action plan, which is already published. And now, very briefly about the public participation strategy for this action plan. As I told you, that was done through in-person consultation, the second annual forum that took place in Panama, and then through virtual consultation from November 2023 to January 2024. And we have had other consultation also, and we have had meetings with different institutions such as UN Women and ACNUR, and then a regional report will be provided. And here we have a brief account on this public consultation. 816 questionnaires were received through the website. Some of them via email. 21 countries participated, many of them individually, and other countries as organizations, and we have public institutions also which participated in this activity. Then here we have the results of the consultation, in line with the draft that we presented, and you can see there is different objectives and actions, and there was a general support to most of objectives and actions. We work especially in terms of how this will be implemented, and then we work on the contributions made and in-person meetings as well as virtual consultation. And then the objectives and access will be covered subsequently in detail. And this is a general view of something that we're working in, reviewing the draft that we presented in the second forum. For instance, this section was improved, including the reference that the action plan will be complementary and synergic to the functions of the committee to support implementation and compliance of Escazú agreement. And then the approach and principles is something very important. We as coordinator has identified the importance of mainstreaming the focus on mainstreaming gender, and we will promote a gender, intergenerational, and intersectional and intercultural approach. And peoples and groups vulnerable people and groups according to the definition of the agreement will also be mainstreamed here. And the plan has full access, each of them with respective objectives and action lines that will be detailed by my colleague.
Just a few general guidelines on the document, some aspects that I'd like to stress. It was defined that the observatory P10 would stress the content relative to the defenders of the environment and will promote its dissemination, access, and understanding. It must also contribute to the development of other human rights related to a healthy environment, and also the state and the public will seek to rebuild a culture of acknowledgement. Communications and sensitization will adapt to social characteristics, economic, cultural, geographic of the public. New action was added to promote the exchange of alliances or partnerships, between human rights defenders and environmental defenders and the state to advance in recognizing their work. The plan is part of the focus on gender and intersectional. The support and technical assistance will also be part of the context and national specificities. The word strengthen was added to the existing mechanisms of prevention, protection, and answers. And of course, the justice operators were detailed, and it specified which materials will be used in different formats, languages, access, and that they be understandable. This was what came up in all the consultations, virtual and in person, and we thought it was important to include them. We can also express that in a member with the member states, we will be disseminating these changes and they will be put to their consideration during COP3 for their adoption. In the next slide, we will offer the floor to Constance from Chile so she can present more in detail what these different pillars of the document are. Thank you very much, Juan Diego. And as we mentioned earlier, this has been a very participative, open, and inclusive process with the intention to elaborate a plan that is applicable. As was mentioned by the chair, this is the most important thing we are going to talk about at the COP, and not only because of the mandate, but because we know that the situation is dramatic for those who promote and defend the environment in our region. So the proposal that you may have reviewed, we hope you have, and that we have also shared in different opportunities, you will see it has a language that has been fine-tuned. And I would say that the main focus was the reinforcement, or to stress the nature and objectives of the action plan as an instrument that arises from the Escazú agreement. Of course, you will not have any language that sanctions or has any criminal prosecution involved, because it is not the spirit of the Escazú agreement. Its objective is to bring to light the different legal guidelines, and that in order to make it easier to apply Article 9, you will appreciate a change in the language, simplifying the action plan. And by simplifying, I am not talking about reducing the standards, but simply making the language more clear and including intersectionality, territoriality, multiculturality, and of course, with an emphasis on people in vulnerable situations in order to address the different pillars and actions. Okay, the presentation is still on the first page. That is correct. Next, please. And of course, as part of the Escazú agreement, its progression, the way in which we will increasingly advance in its implementation, is something that you will see throughout the action plan. There is a first part that is an introduction that reminds us of Article 9 of the Escazú agreement, with the 3 paragraphs that regulate it. And you can see this in detail also in the implementation guide. You can see what these paragraphs entail. And we can also remember action 1/6, as Juan Diego says, is our legal mandate, together with the creation of this open group. It also created the national fora as international fora as an important part of the creation of the plan, and also the process that we underwent to reach this point. And as Article 9 states, there is Resolution 40/11 from 2019 from the Council on Human Rights that stresses the specific situation of people who, the defenders of the environment, as was stressed by the former defender of human rights, Michael Fost. And we also have Article 9. In terms of the objective and the deadline and the timeline, we have the Escazú agreement and its action plan, and the idea is to set a series of axes and strategic actions to advance in the full implementation of Article 9. In other meetings, we've also stressed the importance of the article on the implementation of the plan, and we also stress the core of the Escazú agreement. It will be implemented depending on the possibilities and priorities, national priorities in each country. This will be implemented at all levels, trying to reach the territory It is of national application, but also federal in the case of federal governments, and subnational, and of course, environmental institutionality, the ministries, and apart from the executive power, the judiciary and other branches. So in terms of the implementation, there is mention in Article 3 of the Escazú Agreement on the implementation with a focus on cooperation and strengthening of the capacities through Articles 11 and 12. We also remind you that the plan can benefit of the voluntary contributions. In Article 14, it is stated, and we also make a call to the significant participation of the public. We trust that there will be different strategic actions where different international organizations, academia, NGOs, the private sector, etc., will be contributing to materialize the plan. We understand that there will also be a series of alliances, partnerships, contributing, and everything in the spirit of the agreement, thanks to Article 4.c. We will carry out actions at a national level that will go beyond this and faster, including all action pillars. Now, the focus and the principles are those contained in the Escazú Agreement, as we all know, those contained in Article 3. And what I already mentioned, it is all cross-cutting through the different pillars that we will see on the screen. First, it's important to remember the generation of knowledge. You can see how the proposal is drafted in the plan, and it's knowledge, the knowledge it provides on the situation of the rights and the role of the human rights defenders, and also the instruments for prevention, protection, and sanctions. In instruments, we are talking about, well, different kinds of instruments, and this will depend on policies, plans, measures, mechanisms, etc. So all this has to do with the people, groups, and organizations that promote and defend human rights, the rights of defenders of the environment. There are 4 strategic actions. As you can see, the first is a diagnosis on the situation of those who promote and defend the environment. It's important to have this information. We hope to make contributions from different sources, but this diagnosis that will be a baseline should not take too long. It shouldn't hinder the process. There is an execution deadline of 6 years. It needs to be a space for exchange and reflection, and it received many contributions that were valued in international fora in Ecuador and Panama. We hope to continue holding these fora, as the chair mentioned. Of course, being able to improve the observatory is extremely important, and making known all and disseminating all the information elaborated. Next, please. The acknowledgement of the work of those who defend the environment was also subject to much contribution by the public. This is a public recognition and acknowledgement to the Escazú Agreement as a preamble. We recognize this contribution to the strengthening of democracy. And you may recall that many of the actions that follow are based on the language of the Escazú Agreement. In this pillar, we also saw 4 priority actions. The first has to do with the partnerships between those who were the defenders of the environment and the states for recognizing their work actions on the communication, dissemination, and sensitization on the social, economic, cultural, geographic, and gender characteristics of the public, on the situation of the defenders of the rights of environmental defenders, and the relevance of the work they carry out. Also emphasizing this strengthening of the defense of the environment, democracy, and of course, we understand that there have been some people that deserve a posthumous recognition for their work. And action 4, well, there are several national fora, and we should include examples so that we can have greater openness for other fora that are not as visible. And there may be other instances that go beyond the traditionally environmental situations where we can gain more knowledge and disseminate ours. This axis or this pillar is about strengthening the capacities and cooperation and support of the implementation of the national plan. We can, and to see how we can contribute to national implementation, we have a language here that tries to include as many instruments possible, because we know there is a very dramatic situation, but we must include all the tools and instruments that each country has. Sometimes it's 6 out of the 33 countries that we have in the region. So this, next please. This pillar has 8 actions. The first has to do with generating regional guidelines. How can we provide the states with or help them develop plans and programs to try to prevent any attacks and intimidation? The second in this logic has to do with support and technical assistance. As the Secretariat said, the countries are working on roadmaps or implementation plans, and they can address Article 9. And the implementation within a context and recognizing how this can be articulated with other mechanisms that are already being developed.
We should foster and relate this with prevention against attacks, and also to approach this area in a most robust way. One of the topics which was requested by the public, which was online, is to foster the free assistance to other organizations defending the environment, and then promoting actions which are very traditional in terms of cooperations, whether with the agreement in general, but specifically Article 9, which promotes and defends the environment, and the number 7 to also create activity of training and raising awareness, and in line with Article 6, 7. Then we have different materials in different formats in point number 8. This objective here has been, the rationale is the assessment, follow-up, and revision of the action plan. This is axis D. And the strategic actions are the following. The first one has to do with a general approach to support implementation of the action plan, and which is permanent, and the second action line has to do with developing the implementation of this action plan without being subject to implement this plan, but kind of a schedule to identify deadlines, responsible individual deadlines, and sources of support. We're going to have different actors and international agencies which will support this implementation. It's in then how the parties were established by Article 15, 5C to include which has been the measures for the implementation of Article 9 in line with the Escazú Agreement, and finally to report on the implementation of this action plan. As you can see, these are the action lines of the main axis, and highly focused on in the Escazú Agreement, knowing that this is an instrument that contributes to the Escazú Agreement, but each state party can go beyond implementation, as we have had already covered in every discussion of Escazú Agreement. We're open for questions or comments.
Muchas gracias, Constance. Gracias también a
Thank you, Constance. Thank you, Juan Diego. Thank you to the working group which has coordinated this part of the activities so well. And I think that you are providing a very relevant result that has been said in different occasions to make up the fourth pillar of Escazú Agreement, so we can have a line to be developed accordingly. If you have some questions or comments, please make them on the chat, and we're going to have opportunity for the state's party representative to ask questions or comments. If there is no request, Bolivian delegation. I don't know if it's Diego or Patricia. You've got the floor. Thank you so much. I would like first to thank Chile and Ecuador and St. Kitts and Nevis for this proposal of the action plan for defenders on the human rights and environmental matters. This is going to be essential to implement Article 9. However, as the delegation, we would like to make some observations in order to strengthen this action plan. And we are going to send these comments on a written format by our Ministry of External Affairs, but we think that it's essential that as part of this action plan, the Bolivian case, as well as other countries, consider the important role of indigenous peoples and local communities as the main inspirers of safeguarding the Mother Earth. They are highly vulnerable population when dealing with protecting their rights as users and protectors of our Mother Earth. So we need to include this recognition to indigenous people and local communities and strengthen this language throughout the document. So it is essential that under the article in relation to capacity strengthening and cooperation, it is essential to promote the implementation of sectorial platform for active participation of our indigenous people and local communities. We are putting this proposal forward to make progress in exchanging perspectives in this regard, and also throughout the document, although Escazú agreement recognize this as recognized organizations of the national state of Bolivia, as well as environmental group and organizations, but the social concept involves everyone, environmental groups, private sectors, NGOs, and all these groups which are under the umbrella of social organizations. So it is essential that to request and comment this to the Secretariat, so this action plan could consider social organizations as and first under the common umbrella, and then recognizing their relevant realities of each agreement, which has here the Escazú agreement, such as Bolivia. So in relation to take all these, including the vulnerable peoples, this will enable a truly implementation of Escazú agreement, not only from the perspective of defenders of human rights and environmental matters, but the role of the national institutions, because they are the ones which will implement the agreement. They are going to finally provide access to the information or protection in terms of environmental matters. So we think that these contributions to the action plan presented by Chile and Ecuador is going to be very important, taking into account the reality of our countries. So we are going to send you the comments on a written format, but we wanted to highlight this verbally to all the participants. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bolivia. I've got a request from Mexico. María Fernanda. Marcelo, Argentina also has requested the floor. Probably we could start with Argentina.
Si no está México disponible.
Perdón,
México.
Sí, adelante.
Gracias, muy amables y saludos a
Thank you so much. Greetings to everyone from Mexico. I would like to congratulate the coordinating group for the work that they have done, to thank you for the availability to hear from the participants, and we have done this and we thank you for your work, and we would like to invite all the parties to take this task very seriously, to adopt the action plan in April. Thank you so much to the working group and secretariat for this support, and presiding officers for the permanent follow-up on this process. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Maria Fernanda. Thank you on behalf of the group and the presiding officers as well. Now we have Argentina. Corina, you've got the floor.
Buenos días, ¿me escuchan?
Good morning.
Sí, perfectamente.
Bueno, buenos días a todos y todas. En primer lugar, saludarlos.
I would like first to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat and all the people present in this meeting for your participation, for your collaboration, and of course, officials of the environmental matters, the Undersecretariat of the Environment, who are also present and who have participated in this from the very beginning. And then I would like to mention that for Argentina, this proposal of this action plan is extremely important because our region is one of the most dangerous one for these people. So we think that this is a necessary initiative. Defenders are the actors on this environmental transformation, so their participation is essential. The Escazú agreement is a pioneer agreement in this regard, and we hope that this plan will contribute to an effective implementation. And we thank Constance and, of course, all the ones who have been working in this action plan. Argentina has been very proactive and highly committed also from the very beginning to this action plan. And we are now making the last assessment with the relevant organizations and different areas of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to provide you with a final assessment. But we are highly committed to the general aspect, and we encourage you also to express your perspective in this regard. Thank you, Argentina. Thank you to the ones who have made comments on the chat. Thank you, Nicole, Kate. There is a question from Luisa Garcia. Could you, would it be possible to provide amendments to the text? I will hand it over Secretariat to comment on the rules of procedure in this regard. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the proposal of this plan is a proposal of the coordinating group, which has received comments from the public in this extensive participatory process submitted by Ecuador at the beginning, where there have been different deadlines so the parties could present comments, and of course all the interest of the parties and the public could be gathered to be presented now. There was a schedule and a calendar of different dates where the parties were invited, as well as the public was invited to participate in this activity, and especially from the coordinating groups and from Chile, Ecuador, and St. Kitts and Nevis in charge of leading the proposal. So this proposal goes in hand with the decision made by the presiding officers, which is complementary, and of course should be discussed at the conference of the parties, and if the parties decide or with some changes, the Secretariat will recommend that, given the long process of negotiation that have taken place and deadlines where comments were requested, whether from the state parties and the public, which had been thoroughly compiled by the working group led by these three countries, trying to look for agreed language and amendments which are being essential in such a way that the approval of the plan can be fluent. But as the chairmanship said, that can be modified because this is a conference of the parties which approve the final decisions as well as actions related to the plan.
Thank you to Secretariat and Angelica Barrera, who is making comments on the language used in the plan through the chat. We've taken note of that. Internally, I've communicated with the Secretariat, and they will be reviewing the terminology used because your comment is very pertinent. Thank you also to Chile for their message in the chat. We're going to offer you the floor in the item other topics so that you can introduce the topic that you're mentioning through the chat. I think it would be very positive for you to present it verbally. There don't seem to be any other requests, so I don't feel we need to continue to consider this first decision-making process on the topic of considerations and approvals of the defenders of environmental rights. So I'd like to invite you to analyze and consider the other 5 projects. As I mentioned, there are 6 projects that the presiding officers are proposing for the Conference of the Parties. I'm going to refer to the other 5 briefly, but jointly, so that we can later make comments. The second project is the project of the decision on national implementation. This project is based on the objective of the agreement, but also on Articles 4.3, 13, and 15.5. Aside from emphasizing the essential role of the strengthening of capacities and cooperation for implementation. As you all know, the first 2 conferences of the parties were more procedural, and we need to start with the substantive implementation of the agreement and its pillars: access to information, participation, and access to justice. This project aims at that. It aims to recognize that need and to integrate the national implementation as a regular point of the Conference of the Parties. The project invites us all to continue to advance on the national implementation of the agreement. It celebrates the roadmaps that several state parties have been advancing on. It stresses or highlights the role that several have had and the implementation guide elaborated by the Secretariat, thanking the support of the Secretariat and other stakeholders. It also invites all the parties to elaborate implementation plans as soon as possible, at the latest in 2026 or 2 years after the entry into force for those parties joining the agreement. Finally, we encourage the parties to contribute to the voluntary fund because resources are of the essence for the implementation of the agreement, and other players to also include or offer their resources. This is the second. The third project up for decision refers to the national focal points. The presiding officers have learned that there is a need to somehow code or regulate a practice that is underway, and that the Escazú agreement has somehow been developing before the negotiation process, and it is about formally designating the points of contact in each state in order to facilitate communications between the organization and the state itself. And they made this as a model with the decisions made in other multilateral environmental aspects, and they were adapted to our agreement. What we seek in this process is for the parties to formally designate, and it's something that many have done, and to update our focal points in order to send them and receive from them communications in relation to the agreement. The project has mentioned a series of functions, not in a taxative manner, but in a more informative manner of what the focal points will do, like receiving communications, sending the implementation plans, seeking the representation of the states, supporting the transmission of sharing of documents, among others that you can see in the project that has been shared. The decision project has an annex
los cambios en la designación y la comunicación de esa designación o esos cambios a la secretaria. Este era el cuarto, perdón, este era
This
el
was
tercer.
the third project for or draft decision. The fourth is the cross-cutting, the mainstreaming of the gender perspective.
Desde la conferencia de las partes 1.
It had been mentioned in the meeting in Santiago, but it was also mentioned in COP2 in Buenos Aires. The project stresses the principles of equality and non-discrimination for people in vulnerable situations. And Article 7.10 speaks of the need to adapt the gender perspective, to include gender perspective. It stresses the role of women in the Escazú agreement and the right to access, as well as its implementation at a regional level, but also at a national level. The project recognizes the integration of gender perspective, encourages the parties to continue to promote this, and it requests that the parties continue to mention the Escazú agreement and other fora relative to gender at a regional and local level, and it mentions the need to include the gender perspective in the the defenders of the environment, and continues to include it in the work of the observatory as well. Finally, the support offered is thanked. So it is progress in the consideration of this aspect in all the work we do. The fifth decision-making process put to your consideration refers to the election of the presiding officers. This is procedural. The Conference of the Parties 1.
Eligió a una mesa directiva para ejercer sus funciones. Entre la primera.
I'd like to remind you that a presiding officer group was elected, and that is until the conclusion of COP3. So Rule 7 of the procedurals, laws or rules actually says that this meeting, that this will be in Santiago, and in the next meeting of the Conference of the Parties, we will choose, and the representatives of the parties, a meeting composed of a chair and 4 vice chairs that will be elected in order to guarantee an adequate geographic representation of all the parties and an equitable representation of gender. In this sense, the presiding officers will be elected in the next conference. I'd like to share with you that the members of the current presiding officers have been honored to represent and lead the activities of the agreement, and we have all expressed that this appointment could continue. We have all expressed our will to be re-elected for the new period that will begin at the ending of COP3. And this will be considered at the end of the Conference of the Parties 3. I can't remember if the Secretariat specifically mentioned this in making reference to the organization of the work, but in order to offer time, our mandate will end with the conference of the parties. So that is the 5th draft decision, and I only have one more to refer to. Finally, the presiding officers has made available a draft resolution that suggests including the date, defining the date of the next conference, which is what was done in Conference of the Parties 1. So the next one should tentatively take place between the 22nd and 24th of April of 2026. It would seem to be a lot of time, but we need to begin working on it. So we would like to invite the parties that would like to host this meeting to express their interest should it not be carried out at ECLAC. So if there are no offers to host, it will take place at ECLAC's facilities in Santiago, Chile.
As you can see, we have 5 projects of decision that, apart from being administrative and procedural in nature, I think that this is very important because they are focusing in essential aspect for the implementation of our agreement. If there are some considerations or questions on some of these projects of decisions, I would appreciate if you can write them on the chat, and I invite any of the representative of the states, parties, of the public, if you would like to take the floor, to do it now.
A modo de comentario, en el chat Santa Lucía nos indica que ha remitido algunos comentarios a los
Santa Lucia is saying that they have sent some comments to decision projects on the chat, and they have been recorded by the Secretariat. I request the Secretariat to pay special attention to the comments made on the chat. Thank you so much for the advances that have been made. There is a special recognition comment on the chat. I think that, well, in this moment, we don't know the venue of a conference of the parties for. But if there's someone interested or states parties interested in offering any premises or the venue, they can do so. Francisca, thank you. Joara, representative of the public, has the floor, and Bolivia delegation also. They are asking the floor. Okay, first, the representative of the public, Joara. Thank you, Marcelo. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. We would like to ratify that we have sent a letter on behalf of the representative of the public, and we just analyzed the proposal of the action plan draft with 10 points we think that are very essential, that we consider very important, that are included in the action plan. We have sent this letter to the focal points, and for the focal points who have not received this letter, please let us know and send the updated email to send this letter back to you. In relation to the gender aspect, I think that this is something very important for the public, and we are not going to have the time to do it now, but we wanted to highlight the need of having one day for implementation of this gender perspective mainstreaming, and so we can have some regional reference for the national plan. And so if this is not possible, an action plan in that moment, that we should think on other opportunities to do so. Oh, thank you so much, Marcelo, for this opportunity, and we're open for any request. Thank you, Johara. Now, delegation of Bolivia. We would like to thank for this presentation in my delegation. We are sending the comments on the written format, but probably we can specify the comments considering the importance of reaching a consensus that has been requested in the Escazú agreement. We think that in terms of national implementation decision project, we think that in number 2 there is the availability to prepare the plans and roadmaps. And we understand these plans and roadmaps are prepared by the parties, so we would like to add this part that is being developed by the parties, understanding that the state will be including this according to the human rights defenders in environmental matters. In terms of the realities and contexts of each country, including social organizations, such as the case of the national state of Bolivia, should be recognized, and decision project in relation to focal national points. We would like to add the paragraph C after presented on the state. We think that is an important action here, that the national focal point can participate in the meetings to support and compliance with right to voice, and we are going to send our comments to this decision projects, and we hope that this can be negotiated at the COP level and to adopt these decisions by consensus. In terms of gender perspective, now gender mainstreaming, as we think that it's very important to implement this and include it in the document, because what we have on our side in Bolivia, this includes the conceptual framework which goes beyond the gender perspective. So we think that it's important to consider this aspect. We're going to send our proposal in written so this can be also taken into account. Thank you, Bolivia, for your intervention. There are different considerations on the chat. Two of them are closely related. Elisa Garcia and Victor Valia from Brazilian delegation. They are asking if observers such as Brazil, which has not ratified this instrument but is part of the region, if they can appoint focal points. I think that the answer is positive, and they will have functions which are in line of as the observer quality. But I give the floor to Secretariat to deepen into this aspect. Yes, Marcelo, the decision is focused on the focal points of the party. It has been a common practice that 33 states from Latin America, which are included Annex 1 of the agreement, they can appoint focal points, so the communication with the Secretariat can be facilitated for relevant aspects such as the process of ratification and in line with the elements that are coming out from the conference of the parties. So the Secretariat welcome any of the parties that any country can send this information to the focal point, and they are not part of the decision because they are not parties, but the usefulness of having this there's been a practice of the Escazú agreement, so you are more than welcome to do so. Thank you for this declaration, and the ones who have expressed their messages via the chat. We thank you very much to each one of you. We take notes of your comments and clarifications. So I think that we can continue. We have presented the 6 decision projects that the presiding officer has prepared and put to the consideration of the parties and to each one of you for the next conference. And next point has to do with the committee to support implementation and compliance, given that the committee was elected in the extraordinary conference of the parties, the last conference of the parties, which was held in Buenos Aires, April 2023. And given that the committee will session before, after the conference of the parties 3, in Santiago. Now I would like to give the floor to Patricia Madrigal, President of this committee to support implementation and compliance with the Escazú agreement, so she can tell us about the activities of the committee. So, from the beginning to date, And Patricia, you are recognized. Thank you, Marcelo. Good morning, everyone. It has been a very interesting session, a preparatory session for the next conference of the parties. We're going to have a very productive opportunity to discuss Escazú agreement, also implementation and compliance. And as Marcelo said, we were elected by you, states parties, in an extraordinary meeting in Argentina last year, and we took office in August 2023. So in the moment of the appointment, we started working in the decision 1-3, which establishes that the committee to support implementation and compliance should develop their working modalities with the participation of the public and considering the capacities and national capacities and circumstances with the support of the Secretariat, which drawn up a draft. We defined a process for the participation of different bodies, and we have been working with the presiding officers, and we really appreciate for their guidance and assistance. And then with the states parties, the elected representative from the public, and as well as the public in general. And in parallel, we had some dialogues and exchanges with process similar to the Committee to Compliance, the Argos agreement, which has been many years in terms of implementation and compliance, and with the Committee of Human Rights of the High Human Rights Commissioner, as well as the different organizations, government and non-governmental organizations of the region. On November 15th, we had the second session of the committee open to the public, where we made a general presentation of the contents of that modality of work. On December the 10th, with the states parties and representatives from the public, we sent the proposal for document to analyze it, and then meeting with the state parties took place in January 18th to make a preliminary presentation and listen from their comments. With elected representative from the public, we had a meeting on February 22nd, and throughout February, we uploaded the document at the ECLAC's website so anyone could send observations and comments. We have ended up with that phase, and now we are reviewing all what has been received to integrate all these comments in the best possible way. We participate in the second forum on defenders of the human rights defenders in environmental matters in Panama, and we had the opportunity to be present in these spaces of dialogue and reception of comments, having internal sessions with different organizations and listening from their comments and contributions.
We also have the support of Secretariat in designing a so that we can work with the functions and the mandate of the agreement. Next Monday at 9 a.m., the committee will have session number 3 in person at ECLAC, and the objective of the session is to approve the way in which we have been working with all of you in the last few months. And those of you who are registered for COP will be able to be in person. It will also be streamed. So we will have a second session on Thursday, April 25th, in person to explain the way in which we will work in order to get to know the virtual platform and how we can most benefit from it. So in this function or application and of the agreement to the member states, we hope that this next conference of the parties can comply with the approval of the defenders for the adoption of decisions and to continue to develop content for the Escazú agreement's operation. Thank you very much for offering me the floor. Thank you. It is extremely important and generous of you, the work you're doing. It is extremely important for the implementation and support and compliance of your obligations. Thank you. I would like to invite you to move on to the next point in the program, other matters. At this point, we have two main topics to consider. The Secretariat had left a few items to consider, but the request of the use of the floor in Chile for some matters that were done on the chat. If the Chilean delegation is available to take the floor, I would offer it to them so that they can make an oral presentation at this point. Ms. Flores, you have the floor. Camila. Camila says she does not have access.
Mira, ya te estamos viendo.
Yes, now I am on, yes. Thank you. Well, as was mentioned in the messages, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs thanks everyone, and ECLAC, we would like to offer our proposal. We will send it in writing as well, but it is for consideration of the COP in accordance with Article 5th of the procedures of the Conference of the Party. The idea is for it to have as a title the exchange of experiences, creation of capacities for the implementation of 6.4 of the Escazú Agreement, which refers to the registration of emissions and contaminants in the water, soil, and air. The idea and the purpose of this inclusion is to further strengthen the capacity of the parties to generate environmental information that can be used for adequate decision making. The idea is for this to be presented to the public in the terms that the Escazú Agreement has. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you, Camila. Thank you to the Chilean delegation for the proposal. As we've mentioned in a few times, it's very important for the agreement to allow us to get out of the procedural aspects that we've used to make the agreement operational so that we can go into the more substantive aspects foreseen by the agreement and so that the pillars can be implemented. Your intervention is well received. we would like to recall the request by Bolivia to make use of the floor.
La oportunidad en este momento.
Gracias. Como Bolivia, bueno, queríamos intervenir en el
Well, Bolivia would like to mention, as we mentioned earlier, we have a question for the committee. Have you considered the work capacities of the committee proposal that was made by Bolivia 2 years ago in respect of how this should operate? So we're not sure whether it has been included in this dialogue, in this proposal, this contribution by Bolivia, and depending on the chair's response, I would like to make an additional comment.
Gracias, Bolivia. Seguramente la respuesta más específica a su consulta.
Thank you, Bolivia. Perhaps the most specific answer to your question would be sent with the report of the Secretariat, but I can offer the floor to the Secretariat first and to the chair, if they're still with us, so that they can answer to these consultations. Thank you, Marcelo. The procedure to elaborate the forms of work is a procedure that we've been working on with the chair and Patricia Madrigal. This has been an open and participative procedure to provide all the necessary input. And it is a working document, as the word states, for the committee to be able to better carry out its functions within the framework of the rules that have been approved for operation by the committee, those that exist now, and the rules of the conference of the party that exist, which would be the two instruments approved. Having said this, this procedure has several modalities that are necessary for more fluid or uninterrupted work by the committee. The committee has been generous in receiving comments by the public and by all the parties to consider all aspects that could improve the daily work of that committee, and has done everything possible to allow for a proper functioning of this group's work. I believe that is the answer, but I'm going to return the floor to the chair and the committee in case they have any additional comments.
Patricia, si hubiera alguna aclaración pertinente.
Patricia, if there's any additional comments? Well, I'd like to state that until now, the committee has not received any comments for consultation, and the member states, since mid-December, they've been meeting, and there was another meeting in mid-January, and in this space, we did not receive any of these comments by Bolivia. It has been, however, done in several of the member states. And in accordance with what the Secretariat has said, the document that we're managing at present is strictly in respect of decision 1.3, which was taken in the first conference of the parties, and we need to strictly adhere to these rules. And Bolivia, of course, it's out of deadline, but we will take into account Bolivia's comments. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Patricia. Ya le adelantado el agradecimiento a la Secretaría Entiendo que
And
Bolivia no
I
había
understand that Bolivia had not
su intervención en el uso de la palabra anterior. Si así fuera, le solicito que intervenga en este momento.
if Bolivia has any other comments, I would ask that you take the floor again. Yes, well, Bolivia participates in this negotiation process in good faith and as part of the decision of the first COP of Escazú. We were hoping that the Secretariat would have circulated our proposal. Bolivia once again needs to send a proposal, but we shouldn't have to if it was already sent, and the Secretariat should have circled it and circulated it. Since it has not been done, we understand and will comment on it at the COP that we are available to approve the ad hoc work system until we would not be willing to sign until our proposal has been circulated, as was decided in COP 1. And in this context, we will present this decision, this draft decision, hoping that Bolivia's proposal will be taken into account. We request the ECLAC Secretariat to first inform our proposal as part of the operation of the committee, and we understand that this will happen in the second item of the agenda at the COP, and we would like to continue examining this proposal. And we would like to remind the Secretariat that we have this proposal and that a process be carried out to integrate this proposal into the form of operation. And finally, to elaborate a specific report on the consultations for their presentation and discussion at the fourth COP, so that in 2025, so that we can discuss the functioning of the committee in COP5. And of course, we are concerned about the document that we've received because we understand that it's an agreement to solve controversies in other countries. So this document goes beyond the Escazú agreement, and that is something we would like to take a closer look at. And another thing that is important is that the spirit of the Escazú agreement is to have an agreement that facilitates these processes, and the spirit is to find amicable solutions, and it is an exception. It is the exception to the rule is finding solutions to non-amicable situations. So the procedure and the form of work should find an expeditious mechanism to advance the implementation of the agreement, and a fast mechanism or a fast track would be an exception to the rule. So there is a procedure that needs to be more agile, and being expeditious should be the rule. On the other hand, there's some players that would like to be visible. For example, the private sector, which is affecting the environmental issues that are of concern to the Escazú agreement. These should also be included in this form of work.
The procedure should be coordinated to make progress in a process which is amicable, with dialogue, and for the solution that need to be stated the Escazú agreement level. And I think that we need to put more emphasis on this. So this is a greater institutional coordination of the support committee and the government, and we think that modality of work should include this. These remarks are going to be stated as plurinational state of Bolivia as a proposition, as something proactive, because we're interested. The Escazú agreement can provide tangible results for our countries, and our spirit is to make contributions and to get consensus which made us possible to make progress along this, and we're going to propose how to can continue making progress here, and we will send all these proposals in written format. Thank you, Olivia, for your intervention and comments. As you have said, we need to be very clear about the difference between two elements and two documents which are related to the committee to support implementation and compliance. On one hand, the rules of composition and function of the committee, which is a decision of the conferences of the conference of the parties, which was adopted in COP1 in Santiago in the year 2022, which is the decision 1.3. And that was in line with some proposals of Bolivia, which are also included in decisions of the Conference of the Parties in that occasion. Another different document which was that has a different procedures and development is different are the modality of the committee to support implementation and compliance. And this second document that based on the mandate stemming from the first one is the one that Patricia talked about as chair of the committee, and she mentioned that some comments had been received from some delegations and the public. So each of the document has different origin and documents, as well as procedures and documents which are different, and the public and the state had the possibility to participate in the process as well. So I making this clarification because I know that Bolivia is very clear about this, but probably not all the participants are in that position. So Secretariat would like to take the floor to make some clarification probably about this. And Carlos, you got the floor. Yes, thank you so much. The presiding officer had made a clarification of the objective of the documents, providing the certainty to Bolivia that the Secretariat as well as the presiding officers duly complied with the dissemination of the proposal among the parties, and that report will be included in the reports of the presiding officers and the secretariats in the next conference of the party has been established in decision 1.3. And the secretariat shared with the Bolivian delegation that spirit of dialogue of Escazú agreement to strengthening capacities and cooperation, which is the core of the implementation of the agreement. And as we will see in the conference of the parties, we hope that the committee, as well as different working groups and agencies have also the same objective. So thank you so much.
Gracias a la Secretaría.
Thank you.
Reconozco que no existen otras solicitudes para hacer uso de la palabra en este punto.
Well, there are no other requests to take the floor, and given the time, I think that would be very convenient that Secretariat can develop the pending matters that we have announced that would be included now. Please, Carlos, can you take the floor, taking into account the time? Thank you so much, Marcelo. Yes, I would like to mention other topics related to the conference of the party, which are of interest for the public. The first thing is to remind you that there is a website specifically of the conference where every aspect related to the conference are reported there. You can access from the website of the Escazú agreement and you can have direct access to that. Of course, the program has been updated and any new information will be uploaded in the two official languages of the conference, which is, in Spanish and English. Although the conference of the parties, everything is transmitted via web streaming, so everyone can participate following the conference and also sending comments to the representatives of the public. For this, I would like to emphasize that Escazú process characterizes by a very important participation. So the public participation has been defined in the treaty itself. This participation is very active and has some mechanisms which are different from other conferences of the parties.
No solo la presencialidad en la COP
and is looking for the participation, not just in person or virtual participation, but also at territorial level, national implementation, supporting the conferences, whether as states parties or observers. It is essential that the ones who have joined this meeting for the first time, you can register in the regional mechanism because different activities are reported. They are not only a conference of the parties, and sends some information which is very important and also is necessary to have active participation in the conference of the parties. Now, in terms of registration, as you know, upon request of previous conferences of the parties, the registration was opened with more time in advance compared to former conference of the parties to open the participation of different actors, including the public. I would like to make reference first to delegation. It's very important that delegations also registered, but they also should send the credentials to participate in the decision-making processes. In relation to the public participation, I wanted to congratulate the public for their great interest in the participation in the conference of the parties. There are many opportunities to actively participate throughout these processes that has been said in the presentation of the working group, as well as from the presiding officers and also the steering group. But I would like to mention something that is very important. The Secretariat has to apply the rules of procedures to the conference, to the participation of the rules of the game, and they define the rules of participation. The ones which were registered should receive 2 emails, one ratifying the registration, but another email of confirmation that registration has been approved to participate in person. I would like to remind you that everyone can follow this conference on the virtual modality. Identification will be required, as well as the email. And in case so people had registered and the confirmation was received, but they cannot participate for different reasons, it's very important that you notify the Secretariat about this. And because we have restricted capacity of people in the room, and that will give the opportunity to people being in the queue that they can access to the sessions. So it's important that for Secretariat, it's very important to counter information about geographical representation of the public, and it's important that today there is high participation of non-state parties, and so I would call upon that they can support us, and we are encouraging them to join us as parties. The Secretariat has participated in all these and is taking care that the number of people is not exceeded given the high demand of participation. So once the capacity of the room, we will have to look for the participation of the people, taking into account the geographical location and gender aspects. The registration to the Conference of the Parties for the Support Committee to Support Implementation and Compliance is also very important. I will talk about now to the side events of the conferences of the parties, in order to promote exchange of knowledge, to develop capacities, and to establish, to networking and to share experiences. The Secretariat has offered the possibility to undertake side events, official side events. All these events are on a virtual mode, so it is highly recommended that you consider to facilitate this information to the Secretariat when there is an interest on your side to undertake a side event. So this specific event about this side event should be provided. This side events opportunity is open since February 16 and will be open up until March 8th. So each organization will be entitled to request one single side event. And when these side events have been approved, we will request all the information to communicate them from the website of the conference.
It's important to take a look at the basis in order to present the proposals, because there are a series of interesting topics that will be treated during this conference. I'd also like to remind you that simultaneously there will be there was a call from the Secretariat to introduce other thematic topics, and this concluded last Thursday, the call. There was a huge affluence of proposals, and as I said, These articles are very much related to access to justice and the protection of defenders of the environment. This has a dual procedure, and we've asked the people interested to send some concept notes to the Secretariat, and an external independent committee will assess these with a selection of articles that will provide for other activities around the conference of the parties. And we would be waiting for the full articles in order to move forward with a publication. I would like to mention, because it was one of the questions asked in the chat, that there would be some activities connected to the COP. And of course, everyone is invited. It's a process of participation for the evaluation, environmental impact evaluation. And we have some other activities considered with the defenders of the people. And as a result of the work carried out and coordinated with other agencies, ECLAC and UNESCO have moved forward, and there are a series of publications on experiences with access to environmental information. These are the different elements, but our call is for participation. Participation is of the essence. In this forum and in other conferences of the party, everyone is invited to participate. The representatives of the public do excellent work in order to improve this process, and please help the Secretariat with all the work that needs to be done in the territories and state parties. I'd like to thank you for the floor. Thank you to the Secretariat. We're going to take a look at how many articles will be selected. There is a request for use of the floor by Bolivia. If it is about this matter, Bolivia, you would have the floor. Thank you, Bolivia, for your clarification. Carlos, if you could clarify on the articles as requested, which articles will be selected? Yes, I would like to offer you a piece of good and bad news. As happens many times in Escazú, the Secretariat is overwhelmed by interest and participation in the agreement, and we have received a huge number of proposals of articles that we need to select from. And in this first round of selection, we are thinking about 9 or 10 articles in order to continue with a subsequent publication. But of course, many more are probably interesting, and we may be able to discuss them in the future. But at this point, the selection has been limited, and it is a very complex process for the Secretariat and the presiding officers, because it did conclude last week. We have a large number and very high quality of proposals. So we would like to thank everyone for your proposals, and we would like to continue with this positive energy for the implementation of the agreement with through this mechanism. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you once again to the Secretariat. I don't see any other requests to make use of the floor or with comments on this point. So I believe we could conclude the consideration of other topics in order to, at this point, and in order to continue with the closing of the meeting. Allow me to make a few final reflections on this meeting for when the pre-COP concludes. First, I'd like to thank the ad hoc committee on defenders of human, on the rights of defenders of the environment and their coordinators for all their work. This work is key to our conference of the parties, and we hope that this pre-COP has served to pave the way for the discussions that we will have in April. The comments received and everything you have sent to us will be delivered to the group, and I'm sure that they will be able to enrich their work with your contributions. We hope to have an action plan in April for these matters, as we have set forth in the first COP. We're going on to the fourth COP. In the second place, allow me to celebrate the enormous interest of the public. The public is a key part of the agreement, and have enormously supported us. We would like to invite you to continue to be involved, not only through the participation in the Conference of the Parties. It is a more institutional instance, sometimes with a lot of administrative content. I would like to invite you to participate in the agreement through the channels that the agreement foresees and the multiple instances that we see, and through the representatives that we've elected. We would like to somehow bring your contributions through the representatives and offer support. This is extremely transcendental for the public in general, but also for the correct operation of the agreement. I would also like to thank the Secretariat and the presiding officers. The presiding officers, because we have worked with a very positive spirit of collaboration. There have been discrepancies, but it has always been in favor of the agreement and the improvement of its activities. I am referring to the state parties and the representatives of the public that have also participated. And the Secretariat, because all this work, all these meetings require the dedication of so many people of the Secretariat, all the administrative work, the resources, the participation of the interpreters. So to all of you, our deepest thanks. And finally, allow me to express my conviction that with the support of all the member states, with the support of the public, with the support of all of you, we will be successful in holding COP3. So we hope to see you from the 22nd to the 24th of April. I hope to see all of you in person, or you will be able to follow us via streaming. Until then, thank you very much. And this concludes this meeting. Thank you. Thank you